As he left his home this morning hand in hand with his wife Carla Bruni, former French President Nicolas Sarkozy was greeted by hundreds of cheering supporters. Sarkozy embraced his children, kissed his wife goodbye and got into a blacked-out car. A motorcade that once would have whisked him to the presidential palace, instead taking him here to Paris's notoriously overcrowded La Santé prison, where reporters outside heard convicts shouting "Welcome Sarkozy" from their cells. He was allowed to bring 3 books with him. He chose a biography of Jesus and The Count of Monte Cristo, the fable of a man who escapes wrongful imprisonment to wreak revenge on his enemies. His legal team has already requested parole.
C'est un jour funeste.
It's a disastrous day for him, for France and for our very institutions, because this sentence is a disgrace.
If they absolutely want me to sleep in prison, I will sleep in prison, but with my head held high. I am innocent.
Je suis innocent.
Sarkozy, reacting last month after being given a 5-year sentence, said he'd been the victim of a political smear campaign. Years of questions had swirled around his relationship with Colonel Gaddafi, and a court had found him guilty of a criminal conspiracy over plans to secretly finance his first election campaign in 2007 with cash from the Libyan dictator in return for restoring his international image. This is particularly painful for France, given Gaddafi's brother-in-law, who Sarkozy's aides had secret meetings with, had been sentenced in absentia over the bombing of a French airline. All 170 people on board were killed. But it wasn't until Gaddafi's regime began to crumble that allegations of a deal would surface. 4 years after his election, Sarkozy would turn on Gaddafi, supporting the Libyan opposition and leading the bombing campaign against forces loyal to him. Gaddafi, in one of the last interviews before he fled and was ultimately killed, told journalist Delphine Minuit that he felt let down by Sarkozy. Where was he in his hour of need, especially since he gave him all that money for his campaign? It was a statement designed as a last-ditch cry for help that never came, but it set in motion a path that led the former president from the Élysée Palace to prison. Sarkozy has lodged an appeal and as a result under French law is considered innocent, but he was told he must go to jail because of the exceptional seriousness of the facts. This is his 3rd conviction in the last 5 years. He's currently appealing 2 others, over bribing a judge in a separate case and over illegal campaign cash in his failed re-election bid in 2012. Even so, it's the French justice system that's been under attack from his allies. France's justice minister, a friend of his, was criticised for saying he would visit him in prison. So too President Macron for receiving him at the Élysée Palace on Friday.
Sur Nicolas Sarkozy.
I have always been very clear in my public statements about the independence of the judiciary in my role as president, but it was normal on a human level to receive one of my predecessors in this context.
Eleanor Carrois, an MP from Macron's party, spoke to me after Sarkozy's conviction, just before being appointed minister. Herself a lawyer, she told me she was disappointed at his attacks on the justice system.
Ultimately, if he was found guilty, I think it is normal as any citizen that he pays for what he did.
Because quite a lot of people have been critical of the judges. Has that surprised you?
It's not surprising because it's a trend that you see in France but also in other countries. Judges are an easy target, but I believe it is also a very dangerous move to criticize the ones that actually state the law and make the judicial decisions rather than looking at what actually happened and at the facts.
Sarkozy will likely be held in a 9-metre squared cell with a TV, shower and toilet in the solitary confinement wing to avoid contact with other prisoners. Former La Santé prison inmate Pierre Botton said it's the first night there that's the hardest.
Clack, clack. So at 7 p.m. they will double up the door, and you hear, he will hear, those 2 things, and there you're in prison. And it's very hard to be alone with yourself. We're not used to it. No one is used to not being able to open their door.
This morning, Sarkozy posted on X maintaining his innocence, saying he felt a deep sorrow, not for himself, but for a France humiliated, he said, by a will for revenge.
His reputation suddenly took a terrible blow, and so did we all, because collectively we elected that man. Of course, he's saying he's innocent. He's saying that judges are biased, but this is a very dangerous thing to say when you're a former president, because if you start thinking that justice is not the same for everyone, then there's no justice left.
As she left the court following her husband's conviction, Sarkozy's wife, singer and supermodel Carla Bruni grabbed and threw the microphone of an investigative journalist to the ground. She too will be standing trial next year, accused of witness tampering in this case, which she denies. These clips she put out of herself enjoying Fashion Week after her husband's sentencing went viral online. This a couple well used to courting press, power and money. For Sarkozy, in the end, all three would bring him down. He once described himself as the sum of all the humiliations he suffered during childhood when he was bullied over his height. Nicknamed President Bling Bling after holding his election victory party in one of Paris's most expensive restaurants, he became a player on the global stage, a celebrity, someone who would grab newspaper headlines for best or worst. Tonight he becomes the first former leader of an EU country to be jailed.